Joining me now, Jacob Magid, U.S. Bureau Chief for the Times of Israel. Welcome back.
Thanks
nice to see you. We've got part of what Trump said about Harris's record on Israel. Let's play a portion of that.
She's been very, very bad to Israel, and she's been very bad to Jewish people. And I say it, if anybody I know is Jewish and they would vote for Kamala over me, they should have their head examined.
Jacob, what are you hearing from Jewish voters about their view of Kamala Harris?
Look, I think we're still in a regular election in that we're talking about between 3/4 and 2/3 of Jewish voters who still are going to vote for Democratic candidates. I do think in the backdrop of October 7th, the war in Gaza, and the uptick in antisemitism that we've seen as a result, that there are more Jewish voters who are looking inward, but still Jewish voters come to the polls not necessarily thinking about those issues. They're talking about climate, they're talking about the importance of maintaining a strong democracy. Those are the issues that really, I think, galvanize Jewish voters. Of course, though, when in such a close election, as we saw in the previous one and as this one too, where 1 to 3% of Jews are making up the vote in swing states, they can play a role. And therefore, even these voters who do care a little bit more about, are concerned about anti-Semitism, concerned about President Biden's policies on Israel, then they do play a little bit more of a role.
Right. Are their voices heard? So the question becomes, if we see a ceasefire or not in Israel with the fighting in Gaza, how might that factor into votes in November?
I think it helps definitely the Democratic candidate, Kamala Harris. It definitely was something that President Biden shifted, I think, in his policies in terms of how he was approaching the war. It became the most important issue was to try to just get a ceasefire as soon as possible. It feels like it's a distraction for a lot of voters, not just Jewish voters, but beyond. And I think it would help. And that's why I think we're seeing again this push tomorrow, where there's going to be this hostage talks summit in likely Doha to try to get, this was a U.S.-led initiative to try to get this war winding down.
Trump is seeing some momentum with Jewish voters, more popularity than he has in the past. To what do you attribute that?
I think there's already been a shift, regardless of Trump, slightly moving Jewish voters to maybe get closer to 30%. The Republican Jewish coalition talks about even moving past that. In coming elections, I think he's going to play up the steps he took for Israel as president in terms of moving the embassy to Jerusalem and various other steps, pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal that he likes to tout. But again, it's still, we're looking at a pretty traditional, again, vote of a strong Jewish base.
So AIPAC, which is American Israel Public Affairs Committee, was able to drive out members of the squad recently, Jamel Bowman, Cori Bush among them. The group invested about $24 million or so to take down some prominent black members of the left-wing party. What do you make of that, and what's the impact as a whole on the Democratic Party in some of these down-ballot races?
So I think the AIPAC tries to argue that it's just good politics to support Israel, and that's how it's framed its argument. But it's also, I think, helpful politics to have the millions of dollars that these candidates are receiving as a result of their support. We did happen to see yesterday, actually, Ilhan Omar, another member of the squad, who not just AIPAC, but other groups felt that she was pulling farther ahead in her race and therefore didn't invest in trying to take out Ilhan Omar is the way that they referred to it, and Don Samuels, the candidate that was coming out against her, didn't manage to succeed. So I think that's kind of how they look at it.
I'm curious, Jacob, I know you talk to a lot of young people. Folks are headed back to college soon, and we saw what happened after October 7th on many college campuses. How are students that you interact with feeling about going back to school with concerns about their safety, anti-Semitism, and what little we've seen from some colleges in response to it?
Right. I do think there's a bit of angst. I don't think when I visited a couple college campuses over the year, and I don't think anyone was talking about leaving where they were going to campus. For example, at Northwestern, the Jewish students there who were experiencing a little bit of a spike in anti-Semitic incidents still said they were proud to be going to Northwestern and they wouldn't want to go anywhere else, for example. So I think that, yes, there's this angst, but it's not really dictating where they're staying.
Yeah, still a real concern, though. Jacob Magid, pleasure to talk to you as always. Thanks for stopping by. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.